to President Trump and some phone calls, specifically his claims about two phone conversations filled with Trump praise, one from Mexico's President Enrique Peña Nieto, the other from head of the Boy Scouts. Both parties involved now say these phone calls never happened, but President Trump did talk to the Wall Street Journal last week after his speech to the Boy Scouts, and this is just part of the transcript that we have that was released by Politico. Quote, "I got a call from the head of the Boy Scouts saying it was the greatest speech that was ever made to them, and they were very thankful." But the thing here is that the Boy Scouts are unaware of any phone call between President Trump and Scout leadership, and the Scout statement apologizing for President Trump's political speech still stands. So Caitlin Collins is working this for us from outside the White House. Caitlin, so that's the Boy Scouts. Talk to me about this alleged phone call between the President of Mexico and the President of the United States. Did it or did it not happen?
That's a great question. It's being called into question right now whether it even happened. As you know, this all came about during the president's first cabinet meeting with his new chief of staff, John Kelly, on Monday here at the White House. The president was lavishing praise on Kelly, and he was talking about the things he had achieved as DHS secretary when he made this comment about Mexico. Let's look at this.
As you know, the border was a tremendous problem, and now close to 80% stoppage. And even the president of Mexico called me. They said their southern border, very few people are coming because they know they're not going to get through our border, which is the ultimate compliment.
So that might have been the ultimate compliment for Donald Trump, but it also might not have even happened. The president of Mexico is disputing this and saying that he hasn't had a call with President Trump, putting out a statement today saying they have not talked on the phone. Now, we know that the last time they met was July 7th at the G20 summit in Germany, and the president may be referring to that, but the White House has not returned requests for comment on this or some clarity about when this alleged call happened. So if this call didn't happen, as Mexico says, it really ties into this broader credibility problem that we're seeing with the White House. As you know, with that call that Trump says he had with the head of the Boy Scouts, that the Boy Scouts says didn't happen, and with what we learned yesterday about Donald Trump Jr.'s changing statement about his meeting with the Russian lawyer at Trump Tower last summer.
Caitlin, thank you. Let me broaden this out. Would bring in radio host Bill Press. Democrats supported both Sanders and Clinton, and Mary Catherine Ham, conservative blogger and senior writer for The Federalist. Here's the thing, Mary Catherine, let me just start with you. You know, when you hear about these stories, and I realize part of this is a bigger pattern, it's like somebody's nose is out to here now. Yeah. And does that somebody not realize that when you're president, that, you know, your everything you say gets scrutinized and fact-checked and you get caught?
I mean, he should realize that by now, but I'm not sure he does. Look, I think he's naturally sloppy, if not lying about this, right? Someone could have passed a message along that someone at the Boy Scouts said this, and it gets transcribed into this. But look, do you think you're going to tell this about the Boy Scouts and the Boy Scouts aren't going to pipe up? This is easily verifiable, and I think the issue is, look, a lot of people voted for Trump because he was something drastically different, and they wanted unpredictable, and they wanted different. But you get to a point where, like, unreliable and making voters uncertain can turn even those who voted for him for those reasons off. And I think when it comes to meetings with world leaders or meetings with Senate Republicans who don't know if he's going to turn on them as soon as they're out of the room, that does become a problem just in daily workings in policy.
We were talking as we were doing this segment, Bill, about, you remember, of course, we love all things Stephen Colbert, and back during the Colbert Report days, you remember, you know where I'm going, the whole word he coined, which is truthiness. Does that not fit here, and isn't that an issue for the American people?
Well, it is. I was thinking of the Boy Scouts, actually. I'm a former Boy Scout, and the first word of the Boy Scout oath is a Boy Scout is trustworthy. Boy Scouts are. I don't think this president is. Echoing what Mary Catherine has said, look, you know, in a sense, it's not a big thing. It's a phone call. No big deal, but it is a big deal because it does speak to the issue of credibility. And this is a president who's got a problem with credibility to begin with, starting with the size of the crowd at the inaugural, and then the fact that there were never any meetings with anybody around him and anybody having anything to do with Russia. And so with that credibility problem, this makes it worse. And, you know,
but
for
Bill,
better or
this
for
isn't
worse,
just a small thing. I mean, I have all the respect for the Boy Scouts, but we're also talking about a world leader. This is the president of Mexico.
Right. No, the world and the president of the United States. So the point I was going to make is, I think, as Mary Catherine, I think, or you said too, I'm not sure that Donald Trump has ever woken up and said, I'm the president of the United States. Look, Brooke, you and I could go out and have a beer, and I could say, you know, I got a call the other day from some big top Republican. I may or may not have, right? That doesn't matter. But the president of the United States, every word he says matters. And so at worst, at best, it's an exaggeration. At worst, it's just a lie.
A lie. How does Sarah Huckabee Sanders spin this? Or defend it, or choose the word?
Look, I think she's proven pretty decent at
verbal
this
gymnastics.
job. And she, my approach would be, if I were in her shoes, the president heard what he heard, and the president's hearing, as you know, is terrific. It's the best hearing. And I'm going to take my next question. Like, I don't know. Perhaps she will say that a message came from somebody and it wasn't this particular call. I think that's possible. I wish that the president would be precise about what he's saying. That is not his style. That's not what people voted for. But like, even when you're not lying, being precise is a virtue, and especially when you're president of the United States.
Can we talk about? Can we talk? I just wanted to move on before I run out of time. We were up against this briefing about the mooch. I know the mooch is gone, but he actually did talk to the Huffington Post, and he's dropping hints about his next move. So let me just read for all of us this part of his interview he did with the Huffington Post's Vicky Ward. This is quoting: "The president told me he knows I have his back, but he has to try to tighten the ship." She says, "So what are you going to do next?" He says, "I'm now going to go dark," he said. And then, he says, "Then I will reemerge as me." What, Bill Press, do you speak mooch? Do you know what that means? Might he have political ambitions? Will he go back to business? Do we have any idea?
Well, I'd have to say first that if that string of expletives and vulgarity that we heard from him last Friday, if that wasn't going dark, I don't know what is, right? I have no idea. Look, this is a total loser. He sold his business, his wife dumped him, he lost his job in the White House, and now the Harvard Review says he's dead. I don't know where he goes from here.
Right, that was an accident, obviously. Right.
Yeah, I think the less we hear from the mooch or about the mooch, would all be better off.
I don't know. I hate to call him a total, listen, I don't know. I don't know the man. I hate to call him a total loser.
It was a very bad week.
It was a bad week. He never should have spoken so freely to Ryan Lizza. Great for Ryan Lizza. Bad for the mooch. Where do you think he lands?
I don't know. This sounds like a superhero sort of announcement. I don't mind looking forward to the rise of the mooch phoenix at some point in whatever style he wants to come back. Perhaps outside of the policy world, but it will be entertaining.
Yeah. Mary Catherine.
I hope it's not in the White House. I just want to say that. I hope it's not in the White House.
MK and Bill, thank you so much. Again, we're watching and waiting for this press briefing. Sarah Huckabee Sanders has lots to talk about today. Also ahead are members of the Republican Party trying to work around President Trump to find a bipartisan way to repair health care. This as more and more Republicans are speaking out and standing up against the president. Also, at White House briefing ahead live as President Trump today signed. Hi there, I'm Brooke Baldwin. Thank you so much for being with me. You're watching CNN. Shortly, we are on briefing watch again today. The White House press briefing to begin in just the next little bit as President Trump makes several major moves on multiple critical issues: health care, sanctions, and immigration. Right now, I can tell you that he's meeting privately with Ohio Senator Rob Portman as this new bipartisan effort. You heard me right. Bipartisan effort kicks off to reform the nation's health care insurance system. Well, we'll talk about that in a second. Also, just a few hours ago, President Trump signed the sanctions bill against Russia, North Korea, and Iran. But while Congress overwhelmingly approved it, the president calls it flawed. And minutes ago, the president debuted the RAISE Act. This is a proposal to revamp how green cards are given out. RAISE is an acronym, stands for Reforming American Immigration for a Strong Economy. The president says it is time for an immigration system that is based on merit.
The RAISE Act ends chain migration and replaces our low-skilled system with a new points-based system for receiving a green card. This competitive application process will favor applicants who can speak English, financially support themselves and their families, and demonstrate skills that will contribute to our economy. The RAISE Act prevents new migrants and new immigrants from collecting welfare, and protects U.S. workers from being displaced.
So let's go to the White House, to our senior White House correspondent there, Jim Acosta, ahead of the briefing. Let's go back, though, to this Russian sanctions bill that the president signed this morning, this veto-proof bill. People were kind of like, well, what took him so long? Well, what is it in it that he says he doesn't like?
Well, and this is something the White House, Brooke, has been saying for weeks now, that they do not want, or they did not want, a bill. This was really forced down their throats. They did not want a bill that limited the president's ability when it comes to lifting sanctions on Russia, or really having the ability to do what he wants with sanctions. They see that, and really, this is not to be unfair to the president. Other administrations have felt that that is the purview of the executive branch, and so they were trying to flex those muscles heading into all of this. But obviously, with the Russia investigation going on, and both parties in Congress essentially saying, no, we're not going to leave this matter of what to do about Russia to the president, given everything we've been talking about over the last 6 months, they brought a bill to the president that essentially had veto-proof majorities. And so even if he had vetoed this today, the Congress would have overridden those vetoes. And so what the president did instead was essentially all he could do. We should mention he did not sign this in front of the cameras. He's done other things like this in front of the cameras, did not do this in front of the cameras. He did this behind closed doors and attached a signing statement to it, essentially saying that this was unconstitutional, and added an additional statement on top of that, Brooke. And we can put a clip of that up on screen if we want to show that to our viewers. The president at one point saying that he was doing this all for national unity, but here's what the president says. Still, the bill remains seriously flawed, particularly because it encroaches on the executive branch's authority to negotiate. Congress could not even, going on here, negotiate a health care bill after 7 years of talking. So taking a swipe at Congress there, and really his own party for not getting a health care bill out of the Congress and to him, and saying, okay, well, you can't do health care, but you can get a sanctions bill to me. He's clearly not feeling good about all of this, and we'll have to take the temperature of Sarah Huckabee Sanders in the briefing room and see how they're spinning this, because obviously, you know, this is a humbling moment for the president. He was forced to do this. He did not want to sign this bill, Brooke.
I'm going to begin with your point there on how it was a humbling moment for him. Jim Acosta, we'll see you in the briefing room momentarily. Thank you. As we're waiting for Sarah Huckabee Sanders to take to that podium, let me just bring in CNN chief political analyst Gloria Borger and CNN political analyst Abby Phillip, who is also a White House reporter for the Washington Post. Ladies, welcome. And Gloria, a couple of points that Jim made I thought were great. The fact that there were no cameras. You know, this is a pretty significant signing, and there were no cameras, so nothing visual there for us to see. And also how he is calling this flawed. And perhaps to Jim's point, this is about, you know, the president's powers being held back.
Well, that's what he says.
What do you think?
The president believes he should have ultimate authority, except that there are co-equal branches of government in this country. One of them happens to be the Congress. John McCain just released a statement saying the framers of our Constitution made the Congress and the president co-equal branches. This bill has already proven the wisdom of that choice. And what the bill says is that Congress gets the final say here, period. Now, there was a veto-proof margin here, so he was backed up against the wall. He had to do it. He didn't like it. He doesn't like it when Congress gets the final say. But sorry, that's the way the Constitution was written. And Congress flexed its muscle here and said, sorry, we're not going to give you the final say on Russia sanctions. And I believe you can't separate that from the fact that the president hasn't come out and said that Russia hacked the election. I mean, these things are joined, and I don't think the Congress trusts him on Russia, period, end of sentence.
There had been questions about whether he understood the boundaries of the justice branch and now legislative. Good point on that. I'm coming back to you. Abby, let me just bring you in here, because also today we're learning the administration is taking on two big issues today. One on this immigration event we mentioned a second ago, where the White House is arguing they want to switch to this skill-based immigration system with the goal of reducing legal immigration by 50%. There is also reporting out of the New York Times today that the Department of Justice, speaking of that branch, looking to challenge race-based admission programs at colleges and universities, meaning with the potential aim of protecting white applicants from discrimination. My question to you is, why is he so blatantly playing to his base? And might part of this be, does he sense trouble looming in this healthcare loss?
Well, trouble is basically already here for him. I mean, you cannot separate the timing of these announcements from the fact that there are to date no major legislative accomplishments for this administration. And we're getting to the point in the summer here where it's do or die. They have to decide, are they going to restart the healthcare debate, which it seems like virtually no one on the Hill thinks is doable or wants to do at this point in time, or do they just cut their losses and move on to taxes? And even the tax proposition seems to be facing a fairly uphill battle. So this administration is dealing with the reality that getting stuff through Congress is really going to be quite difficult for them between now and the end of the year. And what these moves are all about is signaling to the base that, yeah, we're still interested in the things that you guys voted for that put Donald Trump into office, and it's no surprise that they are targeting two kind of absolute pillars of his campaign, one of them being restricting immigration and this idea of benefiting U.S. workers, and the other being the kind of forgotten American, which many people believed was code for the predominantly white middle America, Rust Belt part of the country, and the concerns that they have around those issues.
On the first piece on immigration, and shout out to my writer Tina for thinking of the Statue of Liberty, because there is this poem that's forever linked to the Statue of Liberty. It was once part of the pedestal. It's now part of this display, and it reads, "Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free." I mean, people have pointed to this message. Critics are calling this immigration move today un-American. I mean, how much, Gloria, how much support does this have, not just among his base, but among Republicans?
Well, it may have some support among Republicans. I mean, it remains to be seen. Merit-based immigration is not what this country was founded on. I mean, obviously, you don't want to bring criminals into the country, et cetera, but you don't ask people for their college degrees or their income or anything else when they come into this country. Very often they come here because they're looking for something better than what they have. And so the question is whether, in fact, the president will have those moderate Republicans behind him who didn't want to build the wall, who don't believe in the wall. Will this be any more palatable to them? I don't really think so.
Okay. Abby, over to you. For despite the president's push for Republican lawmakers to not give up on the repeal and replace of Obamacare, there are now these indications that folks on the Hill, the Republicans, actually want to work with Democrats to figure out fixes. We've been talking today about Republican Senator Lamar Alexander. He's talking about holding bipartisan hearings on actions where Congress can take to stabilize healthcare markets. Do you think that this is a trend of what's to come, of more and more Republicans standing up against the president? And what's the net effect of that when it comes to policy?
Yeah, I mean, particularly on healthcare, this could be a moment where the Republicans and Democrats do exactly the opposite of what Trump wants them to do, which is hold hands with Democrats and fix Obamacare. They are facing the reality that the marketplace next year could be absolutely disastrous for their constituents, and the only way to prevent that from happening is, short of passing some kind of repeal and replace that is perhaps better than what they were contemplating before, fixing the marketplace, funding those cost-sharing subsidies to insurance companies. That's something the president and this administration has not wanted to do. And if Congress chooses to do that, which they very well might, it would be in defiance of the administration. But really, Brooke, at this point, it seems like that is really the only option on the table. Leadership has said they do not have the votes to go back to the table on repeal and replace, and it's going to be politically unpalatable to go into 2018 without having fixed some of these problems with the marketplace. People would be in very dire straits, and the Republican Party, because they are running all branches of government right now, is going to be blamed for that.
But it's not even just on health care. I mean, you could add other Republican senators to the list who are standing up against him. Lisa Murkowski, for one. You can also think of Senator McCain and that, powerful speech he gave on the Senate floor, but also what he's saying now in Afghanistan policy. We know all about the book and the quotes from Senator Jeff Flake. I mean, Gloria, what are we, like 6 months and some change into this whole thing?
We are.
The honeymoon is long over. Is this just the beginning of what's to come?
Well, I think it is. First of all, these senators don't want the president, who has threatened to break Obamacare, who has threatened to end these subsidies, because he knows that it would break Obamacare, but that would also hurt millions of people. And that's what the senators don't want to do. I mean, there's another thing on that list. Senator Mitch McConnell has said he doesn't want to end the filibuster in the Senate.
There you go.
And the president has said he would do that. He has a 36% approval rating, a 60% disapproval rating. So it's not like these are all courageous people. They are just looking at the polling right now, and they're saying, you know what, it's okay. And what Jeff Flake has said is, look, we Republicans need to speak out because a lot of this stuff is not anything we agree with, actually. This is not what our party is about. And so you see more Republicans coalescing on issues and saying, you know what, we're going to have to try and do things on our own without this White House. Now, that may change with General Kelly. I saw that Rob Portman is at the White House today, as you were talking about earlier, talking about the opioid crisis. There may be more conversation rather than threats coming out of this White House. We're just going to have to see. But I think we're at a tipping point right now with Republicans in the Senate who are saying, you know what, we may need to go our own way.
Live pictures inside the briefing room. All of the themes we discussed will certainly be thrown at Sarah Huckabee Sanders momentarily. Ladies, thank you so much. Coming up, we'll take that White House briefing live. Also ahead, too close for
a whopping $80 million currently sitting around unused by the U.S. State Department. This, according to a new report in Politico. Congress allocated the money to go towards fighting ISIS propaganda and Russian disinformation. But Secretary of State Rex Tillerson refuses to touch it. The reason? He reportedly doesn't want to upset Moscow. Let's bring in our global affairs correspondent, Elise Labott, who's joining us. Elise, you've been reporting on this. What are you hearing?
Well, Wolf, what I'm hearing is that, State Department officials telling me that this was slightly mischaracterized. Now, it's true that this some $80 million is sitting both in the Pentagon, $60 million in the Pentagon, $20 million at the State Department for use to counter Russian and anti-ISIS propaganda. What State Department officials are telling me is that they're not happy with the proposals that have been sent to them from this office, the Global Engagement Center, which is, has been created to combat some of these propaganda efforts by Russia and ISIS and other groups around the world. And so they are trying to work through proposals. And what they say is one of Secretary Tillerson's aides told me that they don't want to throw good money after bad. And when I spoke to Congress staffers on the Hill, they say, look, we don't want to throw good money after bad, but Congress appropriated this money. We want to see that it's spent.
We'll see if it is spent. All right, thanks very much, Elise, for that update. Up next, an explosive new lawsuit that accuses Fox News, a Republican donor, and the White House of working together to push a false story to the masses. We're going to speak with one of the lawyers at the center of the case. That's next.
Welcome back. Set aside for a moment the giant disagreements between Republicans and Democrats on the future of Obamacare. The most important gap at the moment is an internal Republican affair, a stare down between Senate GOP leaders and the Trump White House.
Let's not move on from health care just because you failed by one vote. The president isn't giving up on health care, neither should the Senate.
But the Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell says, sorry, Mr. President, the Senate won't immediately try again. And as he made that crystal clear, he also fired back at the president's weekend tweet storm, suggesting that somehow a change in Senate rules might help.
It's pretty obvious that our problem with health care was not the Democrats. We didn't have 50 Republicans. There are not the votes in the Senate, as I've said repeatedly to the president and to all of you, to change the rules of the Senate.
No, sir. That was a long way of saying no, sir, Mr. President. So what next? If you can believe it in today's politics, maybe a try at bipartisanship. Senate Health Committee Chairman Lamar Alexander says he's working with Democrats to hold hearings on the biggest immediate health care challenges. Quote, if your house is on fire, you want to put out the fire. And the fire in this case is the individual health insurance market. Both Republicans and Democrats agree on this. So two questions for the table. Number one, pretty remarkable, the Senate Majority Leader saying go away to the White House.
Not for the first time, but
not for the first time, but it seems to be getting a little bit more pointed there.
For the most public time.
Yeah, and then we were joking during the break about a Ouija board. What would the Ouija board tell us on this question of can Washington actually do something bipartisan, temporary, small, modest fixes to Obamacare?
I do think there is a bipartisan desire to get this done. On the part of Republicans, it's more like panic. They are very concerned about the political fallout of the president's suggested strategy of sabotaging Obamacare, making it fail, undermining it so that people's health care gets worse, and then the Democrats all run ads say, see, Republicans want to just make your health care worse. What Trump does is not necessarily the biggest political problem for Republicans in 2018 when they're on the ballot, and he isn't, because a lot of voters really do see them as separate entities. A lot of voters really don't blame Republicans in Congress when they get mad at Trump. But what they will, I think, hold Republicans in Congress accountable for is whatever does or doesn't get done on health care.
I think the big issue here is whether they can keep it contained to just what comes up in those bipartisan discussions, right? I think there is certainly a path forward if they were able to, get together with some ideas, and there are some bipartisan ideas about ways to improve the Affordable Care Act and perhaps attach them to the reauthorization of the Children's Health Insurance Program, which has to be done before they leave for the year. I say has to be done with a grain of salt because we've seen Congress push off things repeatedly, but that's a must-pass thing in a lot of members' eyes. And so, you could see a possibility for some sort of a bipartisan thing to take hold. The question is, can they hold votes on something like that without and resist the temptation to try to attach some of these more partisan issues that have separated them on the broader bill?
Right. And brings you back to where we started.
And then you get back to where you started, and you'll have the president tweeting, unhelpful things that could crater the whole thing. So,
is this divide? Is it just people are still wounded, tempers are still high after the failure of health care, or is there a significant break between the Republicans in Congress and the White House? To the point of Mitch McConnell talking there, Sarah Huckabee Sanders at the White House yesterday was asked about the president's legislative agenda and whether, he was hurting it by the Russia cloud and all those other things. She said, quote, I think what's hurting the legislative agenda is Congress' inability to get things passed. So clearly each side is perfectly willing right now to poke each other. Does it last?
This is a shotgun marriage, and I think it's been exacerbated. The problems have been exacerbated by the health care debacle, but it didn't start there, certainly. Look, Trump has got no loyalty to the institutional party, and the institutional party feels the same way about him. And so when the times turn tough, they're not going to hang with each other like this at all. And in fairness to Trump, I mean, obviously he's more florid in what he says and does and how he says it, but it's not new for a president to shift blame onto Congress when things don't go well for them. I think every president likes to blame Congress when they lose a vote or an election. It's just that it's frustrating for McConnell, I think, because it's not just his call. There aren't the votes there to change the rules of the Senate. And Trump knows that, but he just wants to sort of like kick at them, and that's the easy way to do it, is change the rules.
Just very quickly, I would say we'll see. Tax reform coming up.
Right. Tax reform coming up. We'll see. Well put. We'll see. Thanks for joining us in Inside Politics today. Thanks, everybody, for coming in. Crazy day. See you back here tomorrow. Wolf Blitzer in the chair after a quick break. Welcome back. It's hardly breaking news that Donald Trump for years has had a casual relationship with the truth. But he's president now. Is basic truth-telling too much to ask? Just recently, there was this.
Who the hell wants to speak about politics when I'm in front of the Boy Scouts, right?
Well, as most of you probably know, the president went on to talk about politics at great length, and the head of the Boy Scouts apologized to scouts and their parents. The president says he got a different take, telling the Wall Street Journal, quote, I got a call from the head of the Boy Scouts saying it was the greatest speech that was ever made to them, and they were very thankful. But the Boy Scouts says they have no record of such a call, and they say this, the Chief Scout Executive's message to the scouting community speaks for itself. Well, here's another example.
As you know, the border was a tremendous problem, and now close to 80% stoppage, and even the president of Mexico called me. They said their southern border, very few people are coming because they know they're not going to get through our border, which is the ultimate compliment.
The Mexican government, however, issued a statement saying, quote, President Enrique Peña Nieto has not been in recent communication via telephone with President Donald Trump. Why?
This is who he is. He just says stuff. And I don't want to make it sound like that's okay.
He catches he
but it's
involves
certainly
now
a consistent pattern.
Our neighbor and major economic and cultural partner, Mexico, and the Boy Scouts of America, now caught up in stories about the President of the United States is telling fibs. Really?
Well, I mean, he has a talent for picking enemies, right? I mean, starting with prisoners of war and war heroes way back years and years ago. So, This
trustworthy,
does
loyal,
seem
helpful,
like
friendly,
just
courteous,
another
kind.
instance of Trump hasn't changed from the candidate that we saw on the campaign trail from the very beginning. And the people who voted for him, I think, had their eyes open. They knew that this is who he is. They didn't vote for him because they thought they were, electing a truth teller. They saw someone who was flawed, and this is one of his flaws.
Yeah, Molly makes a good point on the voters having their eyes wide open. I'd add a third example to that, which was reported by Sports Illustrated, that he told some friends in Jersey that the White House is, quote, a dump. Look, if any other president said these things, and this is why I think the conservative rap that the media is tough on Trump is actually laughable, right? Because any other president, I don't care if it's a Democrat or Republican, call the White House a dump and make up stories about the Boy Scouts and the president of Mexico, that would have been the story for days on end, the scrutiny and the questions about this. But because the volume of this, and because it's Donald Trump, as you said, it doesn't quite get the kind of outrage. And I think the question is, at some point, do his voters care? Because the last 2 years, they sure didn't. And so far, they don't know.
And so this is about conversations that some would say are trivial, or the president was making a point, and it's the point that matters.
That's a rationalization.
Not the fib. It's part of the point. That's what they will say. Or, oh, come on, give them a little creative license. That's what they'll say. Here's another credibility question, or questions. There's zero wiggle room if you listen to this.
The president didn't sign off on anything. He was coming back from the G20. The statement that was released on Saturday was released by Donald Trump Jr., and I'm sure in consultation with his lawyers. The president wasn't involved.
The president wasn't involved. That's Jay Sekulow, the president's private attorney. But yesterday, two top White House officials made clear what you just heard the president's lawyer tell you, not true, not even close.
The statement that Don Jr. issued is true. There's no inaccuracy in the statement. The president weighed in as any father would based on the limited information that he had.
The president said that he weighed in the way any father would on the statement. He wasn't part of the email chain. He wasn't part of the meeting, certainly. We all know that nothing came of the meeting. There was no follow-up. There was no attempt to collude.
Now, the statement at issue, of course, was Donald Trump Jr.'s initial response to word that he organized a 2016 Trump Tower meeting with Russians close to the Kremlin. That initial response, crafted with the president's help, was inaccurate. The statement said the primary focus of the meeting was Russian adoptions. Donald Trump Jr. himself has since released emails showing he took the meeting because he was promised Russian government dirt on Hillary Clinton. So in the same answer in which he confirmed the president's lawyer didn't tell the truth, the president's press secretary herself twisted the truth. I'm sorry, you hate to say it, but there are credibility questions about this White House. Sean Spicer is gone. Sarah Huckabee Sanders is standing at the podium. Does she have the same issue in the room that people doubt her credibility, question her credibility?
Absolutely. I mean, and the problem with the Boy Scouts and the president of Mexico, whether it's creative license or making a point or not, is these smaller, little more minor lies and mistruths really point to a pattern and practice at the White House of there is just general disregard, and it comes from the top, to telling the precise truth about things, whether it's a whopper or it's a slight shading of the truth, as I think Sarah Huckabee Sanders was engaging in there about Donald Trump Jr.'s initial statement, because he later expounded on that and actually revealed that there was a lot more that was offered before that discussion took place. So, I mean, I do think that this has created an unmistakable credibility issue for the president and for his aides who speak for him on a daily basis, and it's unavoidable. I mean, there's no way for them to address that now. It's the horse has left the barn.
What I would say is more telling is that the police chiefs came out and criticized him for saying it. The Boy Scouts came out and said, no, you didn't talk about this. The Mexican government came out. The leaks continue. It seems to me that, like, Trump is lying as news at 7. But it seems to me that now institutions and other organizations are coming out and saying the president has no credibility. He also is low in the polls, so therefore we have no qualms about criticizing him bluntly in public.
Right, and to that point, the police chiefs, the president essentially was saying, when you put them in the paddy wagon, you usually put your hand behind the head so they don't care. Take your hand away. And the White House was saying yesterday he was joking. The Attorney General of the United States apparently told a law enforcement group he was joking. We've got to give our politicians some leeway. Politicians should be allowed to joke, but is that an issue on which anybody, especially the President of the United States, should be joking if we take him at his word that it was a joke?
Well,
it's
and
a bad joke.
I think to Perry's point, people have just stopped taking seriously anything he says. It's not questions about credibility at this point.
I don't mean
there
to
is
interrupt.
no credibility.
I don't mean to interrupt, but repeat what you just said.
I think
he's
people
the
don't take
President
seriously
of
the
the
things he says.
United States.
Yeah.
He's the President of the United States. I was raised in a family where you listen to the President of the United States. I'm waiting for my children to tell me it's okay that I fib Daddy. The President does it all the time.
I'm not saying it's okay at all.
Yeah, no, I get it.
I'm certainly not saying that he's a role
It's just
model.
these statements, sometimes these things just roll through the room, that the people don't listen to the President of the United States or don't trust what the President of the United States says.
Well, and the people who do trust and listen to the President of the United States, his core supporters, probably loved that statement about don't put the hand behind the head when you put them in the paddy wagon. It's bad guys, and you want to rough up the bad guys just like the bad guys did something wrong. And this is rhetoric that appeals to them, and Donald Trump knows that. So I don't actually think that he thinks that that's a liability.
Sure, but that core group is shrinking with every passing day, in part because there is a chipping away, there is a gradual erosion, even with core supporters, when these patterns keep happening, when the president's behavior doesn't improve, when he doesn't start acting quote unquote presidential, that does have an effect over time. And you know, it's also what makes him so hard to work for. I mean, we've been talking so much about the staff changes this week. I mean, this is why so many people have turned down the job of being the president's lawyer, because when you go out there and you act on information that he's given you, you never know whether or not you're telling the truth on his behalf when you're his press secretary, when you're his lawyer. And so the new chief of staff, who's going to try to hire a communications director for a president who still thinks it's a communications problem and it's his staff's issue, there's a lot of people who are wary of going in there.
Here's the playbook, and Julie knows this well because she's there in the building every day. If the president says it in public and on camera, they have to say that he was just joking around if it's totally indefensible. If it's not on camera, then they'll just deny it entirely.
Modern day presidential. That's
two
what that
approaches.
is. It's modern day presidential. Straight from the source. Up next, that latest ballistic missile launched by North Korea wasn't just a future threat to the United States. It might have posed.
Cotton and David Perdue introducing their plan to curb illegal immigration. And also you heard right there, of course, the president was asked a question about his signing the Russia sanctions bill, and no comment as he walked out. A lot to get to right now. Let me bring in right now Tony Blinken, a CNN Global Affairs analyst, former Deputy Secretary of State, and former Deputy National Security Advisor under President Obama. Tony, it's great to see you.
Thanks, Kate.
So what the president is laying out right there with the senators, they're introducing a bill. So, of course, there's a long road to seeing how it fares in both chambers of Congress, but a merit-based, points-based immigration system. The reporting was that he wanted to curb legal immigration by some 50%. You've worked, I mean, from your post with working with President Obama on many things, including immigration. What's your reaction to this?
Look, the devil's in the details, but as advertised, this is counterproductive, it's misguided, and ultimately it's un-American. It's counterproductive because if you curb avenues to legal immigration, you're going to increase incentives for people to try to come here illegally, something that we all want to get a grip on. Second, it's misguided because across the economic spectrum, immigrants are contributing to our country every single day. They're picking our crops, they're preparing our food, they're nursing our sick. They're doctoring in places where doctors don't exist. And at the high end of the spectrum, they're creating new companies. 40%, 50% of the new ventures in Silicon Valley. So when you're cracking down on that, on legal migration across the spectrum, you're actually hurting the economy. And ultimately, Kate, it's un-American too, because this country has been built by wave after wave of immigrants. Irish, Italians, Jews, Asians, Latinos. That's who we are. And this is saying, no, that's not who we are. I think it's profoundly wrong.
What about the case that you heard from Tom Cotton? He's made the case before that in cracking down and making sure that there are more high-skilled workers that are coming in, people who can support themselves, who demonstrate skills, it will help the American worker, it will help improve American wages.
Look, we all want to have high-skilled workers come here, and we need to continue to find ways to attract them. But we want people coming across the entire spectrum. Again, it starts at the low end, too. The reality is many immigrants are taking jobs that people who are already here just don't want to do. By the way, if you happen to, say, own a golf course or a hotel or a restaurant, chances are you're employing a lot of those low-skilled laborers who are coming from another country, something the president probably knows something about.
I want to ask you on a completely different topic, but foreign policy related. North Korea. Tensions are, it feels like, at an all-time high right now. Lindsey Graham was on the program earlier. He stands by his assessment that the president has told him that he is ready basically to go to war if North Korea continues down its path of enhancing its missile program. Lindsey Graham, all from the president and Rex Tillerson at the State Department are two different messages. As Graham said, when Rex Tillerson said to North Korea, you are not our enemy, he says at best it's inartful, at worst it's mixed messaging. What's your take?
Well, I heard Senator Graham say something else that was very important that I put my finger on, and that is sharpening the choice for China in using the leverage that it has on North Korea to try to get it to the table, to stop the testing, and to at least put a halt to this problem before it gets even worse. And we have to sharpen that choice. And we started to do that with President Obama. I hope President Trump continues. And it's pretty straightforward. The message to China should be, look, if you can't or won't help us solve this problem and bring North Korea to the table, we're going to have to continue to do things that are not aimed at you, but that you don't like. More missile defenses in the region, more military exercises with the South Koreans and the Japanese, more sanctions, including on Chinese companies and individuals doing business with North Korea. This has to be more uncomfortable for China to get it to use its leverage. We've got to get the North Koreans to at least stop testing this stuff, because the more they test, the closer they get to perfecting technology that can actually give them an intercontinental ballistic missile with a nuclear weapon that can hit us here in the United States. That's the first step. Then you buy time and you see what you can negotiate. Look, we have to also build up our deterrence, make sure that we have all of the adequate responses in place, but I don't think there is a good military solution. Much of their program is buried deep under mountains, underground. We don't know where a lot of it is. Increasingly, they have mobile missiles that they can put on launchers that they can wheel out in a matter of minutes, fuel with a solid propellant. Even if we did know where everything was and could get at it, they have 10,000 pieces of artillery 30 miles from Seoul, South Korea. They get off a salvo and decimate the city. So it's not a really great option.
The human cost is, I mean, it cannot be overstated, the
That's
human
right.
cost, what it would be. Let's see what the president has to say. That's where all eyes are right now on what next steps, if there is one, towards North Korea, especially on China. Great to see you, Tony. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Kate.
Coming up for us, new details on the lawsuit now that has just been released, accusing Fox News and the White House of coordinating on a false story about the murder of a DNC staffer. We'll be right back. You know you get Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina. Senator, thanks for the time.
Thank you.
So first, let's start with North Korea. This news that Barbara was just telling us about, the commercial jet passing within miles of the North Korean missile test. What do you say about that?
Well, I don't think there's an upside to North Korea having an ICBM for anybody, including Air France. So for 20 years, Kate, we have threatened the North Koreans, we have sanctioned them, we've sent Madeleine Albright to dance with Kim Jong-il, the father of the current leader. Nothing's worked. The garbage is piling up regarding North Korea. President Trump has drawn a red line when it comes to North Korea. He has said very directly to me and others and publicly he will not allow them to get an ICBM that would be nuclear tipped to hit the American homeland, and he'd use military force if he had to stop it, and that's where we're headed if they don't stop.
Well, when discussing this yesterday, you took some heat for your comments that basically a war with North Korea is inevitable if they continue with their trying to enhance their missile program. Retired General Spider Marks, a CNN contributor, he called your comments unfortunate. Senator Dianne Feinstein, she said this to MSNBC. Listen to this.
My reaction is that Lindsey Graham should get a classified briefing like the ones I have had and sit down with Secretary Mattis, which I have done.
Senator Graham, do you stand by your assessment here?
Oh, absolutely. I like the general a lot. He's a fine man, and Dianne Feinstein's a terrific senator. But it's their kind of thinking that's gotten us to here. For 20 years, it's this kind of thinking that's allowed North Korea to have dozens of nuclear weapons, not just one. They're going to have dozens of missiles if somebody doesn't stop them. They'll have a hydrogen bomb one day if somebody doesn't stop them. I like Secretary Tillerson. His job is to find a diplomatic solution. I hope he can. But when he says North Korea is not our enemy, tell that to Otto Warmbier's family. So I think this whole approach that they're talking about has failed. It's time for a new approach. We need to let China know that we will pick our homeland defense over regional stability. If we have to choose between an ICBM in the hands of the North Koreans and a conflict in the region, we're going to choose the conflict to protect the American homeland. And quite frankly, President Trump has no other choice because everybody before him has failed.
But have you heard a clear message on this from the administration? I mean, you cite Rex Tillerson, and then you've got the commander-in-chief, which is unclear where they are.
Feeling climate change's impact in